It's a mammoth legacy project that is critical to keeping the taps flowing in Johannesburg, Pretoria and the rest of Gauteng well into the future. However, the tax costs associated with ensuring that Phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project goes as planned have ballooned exponentially. And as News 24's climate editor, Lameez Omarjee reports, yet another investigation into our often controversial national water affairs is now in the offing.
This project is behind 9 years. From the meeting, what I gathered is water will be delivered from 2028, but there will be construction of another dam would be completed in the following year. And then following all the testing, the construction should be closed by 2030.
Later in the show, our trending topic stays with South Africa's water woes. We get an update from Sikonati Manchansha with plans afoot now for Rand Water to help mop up Emfuleni's sewage pollution crisis of the past decade.
Effectively, the municipality has now agreed that it has lost all capacity to operate its sewage reticulation infrastructure.
And finally, imagine swiping your card for a minibus taxi trip. Well, Santaco is keen to make this a reality soon.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
You can get in touch by mailing us thelead@24.com. My name's Graham Robe and I'm a Let's Chat. All this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. The Lesotho Highlands Water Project is one of those old South African initiatives that were taught in government history high school textbooks back in the day. Its story naturally begins in 1986 with a landmark treaty between Lesotho and apartheid South Africa to provide Gauteng's Vaal river system and linking dams with enough water to keep taps flowing in cities like Johannesburg, which is known for being built without a nearby natural water source. Now, Phase 2 today of this legacy project is expected to provide about 490 million cubic litres more of water to Mzansi every year. Essentially, this is going to be realised with the construction of more dams and tunnels. But now parliamentarians have heard that this huge development is facing setbacks, cost estimates have jumped massively, and even a probe is now on the cards. It's not all that surprising given the Water and Sanitation Ministry's history of immense wasteful spending in recent years. News 24's climate editor Lameez Omarjee has all the finer details and she joins me now in our Cape Town studios to chat more. Lameez, thank you so much for your time today on The Lead. I really do appreciate it. Welcome.
Hi, Graham. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. You in and out of Parliament this week. You attended this meeting by Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Water and Sanitation. Let's first establish who was there and what did they reveal about the costs of this project now, because it's not often every day that we get to hear about the finer details of this huge project.
So the Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation, David Mahlobo, was there, and he basically led the delegation, which included the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority, their a state-owned entity which is involved in implementing the project. In fact, I'm going to just abbreviate it to the TCTA. The TCTA is involved in raising funds for the project. And a key thing that came out from this meeting was the cost escalation for the project, which I think last year there were reports that it was around 42 billion. But estimates in November 2024, they revised the estimates, and it has since jumped 11 billion to 53 billion or so.
It's a hell of a lot of money. Do we know why these sort of cost estimates are rising at this juncture? Of course, that Parliamentary Portfolio Committee would have dealt with some of the reasons. What did the Deputy Minister have to say? So
the Deputy Minister basically attributed it to things like rising steel costs and labor. Another factor of the costs was things like changing inflation rates that they're expecting, things like foreign currency fluctuations. Some of the MPs actually asked questions about whether upcoming or existing tariff wars would impact the costs, and we were told that those have been factored in as contingencies, and that's about 6 billion of that 53 billion cost.
Sure, it's quite a lot. But what I didn't sort of know, and it wasn't very clear, is that Lesotho gets sort of duties or it gets royalties throughout this in process. I mean, South Africa's paid millions over the years, right? So it's not as if Lesotho's not getting any money here.
Yes, I guess you could say they're selling us water.
Yeah.
Well, the project is all this infrastructure is being built to sort of divert some of the water to what is known as the Vaal River system in South Africa. I know Carol Payton has sort of written a wonderful explanation on how it all works. I think it's easier to do it this way. It's less costly as opposed to like pumping up the water to the Vaal River system. I think the water just flows by means of gravity. And so that's why they've tried to construct this infrastructure.
One of the tunnel contractors involved in the implementation of one of these key tunnels early on, it's now been sort of like wrapped over the knuckles by the main Water and Sanitation Minister, which is, of course, the former parliamentary ANC chief, Pemi Majodina. And this company was now exposed for the pollution of water sources. What exactly happened here? What do we know?
So it's actually a contractor involved. It's called Kopano Kematla. They were working on constructing a specific tunnel, which is part of the project. They had been issued non-compliance warnings for a while because they were polluting a reservoir. What we heard in the committee is that the effluent was localized, so it shouldn't be too much of a concern in terms of health risks. Because the operations were suspended, it meant like 1,300 people couldn't really work. But we heard that the matter had been resolved. Operations have resumed as early as yesterday. They had to make submissions to say what they're going to do in order to comply with environmental requirements.
People might be a little bit confused with this particular tunnel project and another maintenance project of phase one of the Lesotho project in its entirety. This particular tunnel that I'm talking about recently underwent maintenance from South Africa's side. It's due to remain operational now for another 25 years. They had to change the steel beaming throughout of it. What are the timelines here? Because we know that in 2011, phase two was sort of signed off, right? I mean, this thing stretches back all to the way to the 1980s when that first treaty was signed. Of course, we had the, state capture years under the Zuma administration. We've had a former minister in the Water and Sanitation Ministry, Nomvula Mokonyane, that was brought before Scopers hearings in Parliament about all the millions and billions in wasteful spending. What do we know about where phase two currently sits and what the projections are?
So you mentioned that it was signed off in 2011, and the idea back then was that it would be up and running by 2019. But now the latest projection is that it would be, water would be delivered from 2028, which means this project is behind 9 years. From the meeting, what I gathered is water will be delivered from 2028, but there will be construction of another dam would be completed in the following year. And then following all the testing, the construction should be closed by 2030.
But in the meantime, there's another investigation or another inquiry here. What's the scope of that investigation? What's it supposed to be looking at as per what you heard at the committee hearing?
So we've mentioned the cost escalations and contractors not performing well. So what's going to happen is that a multidisciplinary team is going to be appointed to do a management audit looking into the various problematic contracts, as we've heard, to understand why there have been time delays or setbacks, as we heard. Deputy Minister Mahlobo actually said that in some instances, like 76 days are lost in the construction process. And this team will also look into what's really driving the cost escalations. It's important to mention and that there is an oversight committee. It's called the Lesotho Highlands Water Commission, and they've drafted terms of reference for this multidisciplinary team, and they're going to go out to market or rather advertise to recruit people. That's the latest.
I mean, Gauteng is generally known as a water scarce region. You know, we do have the Vaal system, and it's fantastic. And of course, our other colleagues like Sikonati Manchancha have exposed how that system of rivers and dams has been tainted by sewage in many different parts. Here in Cape Town, of course, we had the day zero scenario play out over in 2016, 2017. The worst drought seen in 100 years. That's really spurred the DA local government authorities, not only within the city but in the province, to create new projects, new systems, groundwater systems. Perhaps we've even just recently seen reports of desalination plant that has been considered a big one. We know that's very expensive. California in the US, I think, is one of the main sort of cities that has shown some success in desalination, the treatment of seawater. In your view as a climate editor, you've been covering many of these themes and issues for the longest time. Is South Africa doing enough on the whole to ensure that we have enough water supply in the years to come? From my mind, I don't think so.
You're right. I don't think we understand the urgency of it. I actually I interviewed the DG of the department, Sean Phillips, a few weeks back, and he explained that from government side, they've worked on the supply of water. The message that must come across is our consumption of water. In South Africa, our average water consumption per capita is higher than the international average in the world. I think the international average is 173 litres. Ours is 218. He also pointed out to me a sort of a success story, I guess, when Cape Town approached day zero. They really got people to reduce their demand for water. And
we all became suddenly more water savvy, in other words, right?
Yeah, and the good news is that we've kind of sustained that. And the goal is to get other metros and other municipalities to do the same. And I also just have to point out, a lot of our water is wasted through things like municipal leaks. And that's another issue that must be addressed. Yeah,
I completely agree. And you would see that based on its own press releases, the City of Cape Town likes to celebrate the fact that it's been very proactive in fixing up the leaks, etc., etc. So you are pointing to something that is of hugely critical concern, is the decaying municipal infrastructure down the line. It's a lot worse in the Gauteng region. And of course, like colleagues like Sikonati have done a fantastic job exposing that. Do you think journalism that looks closer at our water woes in South Africa is celebrated enough? So when Sikonati or yourself do report on it, it might get a few clicks here and there, but in actual fact, we're talking about the future security of future generations in this country.
I think when water shortages become what load shedding is to South Africans, then maybe there'll be more interest. But, I do think people care about water. Because it touches their lives in such a real way as electricity would. I guess if there were even more frequent water shortages affecting different parts of the country, I think right now Gauteng's under the spotlight, but if it happened more widespread, then there'd be more interest. I do like to think that journalism does sort of force government and other people in authority to do something.
With Sikonati's wasteland saga, that's exactly what happened. But I want to just finish off with this, Lameez, and help me out here with climate journalism in South Africa. And we've seen a lot more backing for it in recent years. News 24's got yourself as the editor, a dedicated desk, if you will, to look closer at the images, at the issues. Water security is such an intrinsic part of reporting on climate issues in this country. What are we missing?
Yeah, I think it's so layered and there's so many different parts to it. I think right now everyone is fixated on energy. But I think maybe things like water security, things like food security, the things that really impact people's lives. I know we've written things in the past about how heat waves are affecting things like people's health. Like just finding those links between how climate affects people in a tangible way, health, ability to live, really, food. Those are the stories that are important.
Fantastic. And if you'd like to take a closer look and read up on the topic of discussion in today's edition, Lesotho Highlands Project, vital for Gauteng water, faces probe after 11 billion rand jump, written there by Lameez. Lameez, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
It's been great.
Cheers. To our trending topic now, and we stay with the country's water woes. More concrete plans are now afoot for utility Rand Water to help mop up Emfuleni's sewage pollution crisis of the past decade or so. As News 24 senior investigative journalist Sikonati Manchancha reports, Rand Water is setting up a special purpose company called the Vaal Water Corporation, which both the utility and collapsed Emfuleni local municipality, covering Vereeniging and surrounds, will thus have an official interest in. Manchancha explains that the move will see the stricken council hand over control of 4 old water treatment plants, numerous pumps and pipelines to this new corporation. So as we speak, billions in the budget, infrastructure as well as debt are currently at stake. But it's hoped that this development will ensure sewage doesn't seep into the Vaal system and people's homes in future.
This company will run and operate and maintain all water-related affairs in the municipality. Effectively, the municipality has now conceded and agreed that it has lost all capacity to operate its sewage reticulation infrastructure, its water infrastructure, and has now given to Rand Water that function. This is the culmination of a crisis which has been going on for the past 10 years, a sewage crisis which actually let effluent run amok in the streets of Vereeniging, the townships there around, Sharpeville, Sebokeng, and all of them, in which the municipality has been totally unable to perform its duties.
Looking for even more political intrigue? Well, this month's free audiobook for News 24 subscribers is Being There by former DA leader turned ambassador Tony Leon. In it, he reveals how his successor Helen Zille helped keep the Democratic Alliance in the government of national unity. That's despite its early clashes with the ANC over, among other things, cabinet positions. Have a listen from one of his chapters.
Friday's vote in Parliament for Ramaphosa's re-election as president, like the provincial votes for the ANC's Panyaza Lesufi as Premier of Gauteng and the IFP's Tami Ntuli as Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, was based on an agreement. Yet its last-minute provisions will allow much scope for manoeuvring in terms of seats, both in number and influence, at a cabinet table still being designed.
And finally, relief could be on the way for those unfortunate, unlucky, anxious South Africans who have to sit at the front of the minibus taxi and help count the money of all the passengers who've paid for their trip and give them their change. Sure, nobody likes that. Taxi body Santaco says it's keen to soon pilot a cashless card system. Speaking to News 24's Ntwahai Saleka on the sidelines of Santaco's annual general meeting in Boksburg, President Motlhabane Tsebe reckons now's the time to formalize and transform taxi associations into actual transport companies. He hopes this will help reduce minibus impoundments and bank repossessions. By creating private transport companies, Tsebe says it'll assist in bringing the children of taxi bosses into the business one day. It's not yet clear, though, when the cashless system will be piloted. But Santaco also wants to unite the country's associations rather than have them compete intra-provincially. We'll keep you posted on the outcomes of the AGM. Well, from Lesotho, Emfuleni and our lifelong efforts to secure future water sources to imagining a minibus taxi trip by card, SA is, as they say, alive with possibility. Thanks so much for your comments in response to yesterday's episode, Johannesburg's 16.3 billion rand black hole with Kaya Koko, detailing the current state of city power and the bank balances that are currently very seriously in the red. Mark Rose writes the following in response. Quote, City of Johannesburg administration is an ongoing crime scene and parties like ASA and Patriotic Alliance are aiding and abetting in the looting, whilst simultaneously claiming they have the ratepayers' interests at heart. We'd love more of your mails, comments. You can especially send your voice notes to thelead@24.com. Hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels to be notified of our next edition. Well, with all that said, my name's Graham Robenheimer, and so long as there's news, we'll have the lead.